Sanchez.
And I'm Loud and Chew It.
And we are Bedlam! Today we're going to talk about vibrato.
Voulez ouïr chanson composée et nouvelle des garçons des faubourgs qui aiment bien à boire. Drelin, drelin, dan, 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 drelin, drelin, dan, dan, dan.
I'm hesitated to talk about this.
Yeah, we thought long and hard about that.
I think the main thing to keep in mind is that vibrato should be used as a tool, and many sources talk about how it can be used to highlight text, mainly. I mean, not mainly.
Yeah.
It should be in service to the text.
And I think a lot of sources are confusing about vibrato.
That's true, because
Yeah.
some sources say not to use it at all, which, I mean, that's where we get this idea that early music, Renaissance music, needs to be very straight tone and kind of void of color. But then you have other sources too.
Or sometimes the same source.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Leopold Mozart on violin playing is really interesting because he talks about it as like a palsy, and then all these players have their shaking hands, and then a few pages later he's like, on every long note you should move your hand gently side to side to create an undulation. So
it depends on the piece, it depends on who knows.
Context, the words, the region, the singer.
Yeah,
I think that's
absolutely.
really important.
Because sometimes, I would imagine that if, Leopold was hearing this person playing who had really wide vibrato on the instrument, that he would be like, oh my gosh, you need to stop doing that. But then if you hear somebody who's playing or singing with a pure straight tone, you're like, can we get a little bit more interest
anything?
here?
A little ketchup on my fries, please.
So I think that's where these ideas come from, and how they, I don't know, vibrato has kind of just become this thing that, like, opera singers use it and early music singers don't use it, and I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I really love Bassey, the 17th century French source, because he talks about how people, only silly people like little, voices. He says, big voices are great as well. You just have to put them farther away and they ornament less. And so understanding, like, voices are different. We don't need everybody to sound the same.
Yeah, and also I think of, you'll remember the actual source, but
Maybe.
there was this letter that was written, and it was talking about how this singer had been singing in churches, and they were getting ready to, somebody wanted to hire them to sing for an opera.
Yes, yeah, I think one of the Monteverdi operas. And
Yes.
they ended up avoiding the church singers because their voices were too big. And
Okay, we're thinking about a different source.
maybe.
But the response was, the person who had employed the church singer was like, this person would be great for that. However, they'll need a few months in between to kind of change their style, because, in the churches, they could be much farther away. They could actually have the bigger instruments, whereas for the operas, the directors wanted the singers to first be actors and to be able to convey the text by changing the color of their voice, and even by almost like whisper singing some of the
full gamut.
and yeah, exactly. So it was just a different ball game.
I think people gravitate toward vibrato, no vibrato, because it's simple. They like the idea of press button early music, press button modern music, and they really don't want complicated answer. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it's more complicated. I think it really is.
It can be, but also once you kind of have a feel for how you think a piece should go, then I think that it's also a matter of taste, a matter of good taste. So
yeah, right. That's always in the sources, right?
Yeah.
Use your taste, and that's a real dangerous thing. But it is true. At some point, you have to just kind of go with what feels right.
yeah, so I thought that a good example of different ways to use vibrato would be in this piece called Wandring in This Place by Michael Cavendish.
We'll include the score below, so everyone has that.
And it starts off wandering in this place as in a wilderness. And so it kind of seemed to me, when first looking at this, that the obvious place to use vibrato would be wilderness. On the word wild. Also, that is the note in the phrase that gets the longest note value as well.
So that's an important point, which is that vibrato can be used as an accenter or an indicator of this is important, whereas perhaps an unaccented syllable or something less important would get less vibrato or no vibrato. So you can sort of decide, not all the time.
Not all the time, as you will see later in this
Yeah,
piece.
right. I think it's always important, like, there are no hard rules. There are just sort of general sort of maxims to follow. So yeah, I think that's, I always hate to say something because then people take it to the absolute extreme.
Right.
There's always exceptions, always
Yes,
exceptions.
Yes.
Okay, did you want to do this?
Yeah. So we'll just kind of do the first couple phrases so you can hear where I've chosen to use
assurance.
Just through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You got it. I should say this starts with just voice.
Wandering in this place as in a wilderness, as in a wilderness, as in a wilderness.
Yeah. So you can hear the vibrato on
There's vibrato.
wilderness.
Yeah.
Also, kind of at the ends of phrases, this maybe goes against what some of the sources say. I actually like to use a little bit of vibrato at the ends of a lot of phrases because I think to our modern ears that sounds like it relaxes a little bit, and that's what I'm trying to get after, is that at the end of a phrase we usually relax. That's kind of the ending point of the phrase. Whereas a lot of the sources actually say when you're wanting to be restful, it should be purely straight.
Yeah, again, you learn the rules so you can
break
them, and you can go. We've never had anyone after a concert come up to us and be like, Kayleen was using vibrato at the end of a phrase and it felt unrelaxed. I think there are ways to do intense vibratos, there are ways to do relaxed vibratos, there's all this range, so it's not an on and off switch.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the most important thing. Did you compare to a different spot? Same spot? Okay.
So a little bit later in this piece, we have wherefore I may say, what may I say? Okay, then it goes into Latin. And so to highlight this change, I decided to use straight tone for the Latin. So, here we go.
Starting on wherefore.
Wherefore may say, O Deus, Deus, non est dolor sicut dolor meus.
Cool.
Etc.
Yeah.
So just within that one piece, there are a couple good examples, and try your hand, play around, and see where you might like to use vibrato or not.
This is definitely one of those topics we debated on whether we would talk about or not, just because there are so many strong feelings. But I think at least taking a moment to give our view on it, which is that it's complicated. We should experiment. We should, read lots of sources and read the whole source. The problem is people cherry pick. They find one line in a source and they go, no vibrato, says it clear as day, and then they stop reading, or they ignore the 4 paragraphs down the road when it's like, oh, vibrato is very lovely here. So don't just make yourself happy with what you think, what's simple. Really explore and experiment. So like and subscribe.
Please subscribe to our channel and let us know if you have any questions, any comments that you'd like us to talk about. I would love to talk more about vibrato or ornamentation or whatever. Let us know.